In this video, I'm going to share with you 11 of the biggest mistakes I see first-time CEOs making. There's keeping them feeling stretched thin, overwhelmed, and stopping them from performing at the level they could or need to. And most importantly, I'm also going to talk you through what you can do about it so that you can take control and become more effective in your role. If you're new here, my name's Byron Morrison. I'm the author of The Effective CEO, and I evolve first-time CEOs into the leader their business needs so that they can break through to the next level of success. So if you're new here, make sure you hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss future videos. Reality is that being a CEO is completely different to being a founder or manager. It's a difficult transition to make, made even worse by the fact there's no real guidebook or notes on what you should be doing. And this is why every week I speak to first-time CEOs who are very much feeling in over their head because they got all of these new challenges and demands and problems that are being thrown their way, and they're very much winging it and making it up as they go along. I've been fortunate now to help first-time CEOs in 16 countries to become more effective in their role, and that's why in this video I'm going to break down for you 11 of the biggest mistakes I see them making, along with what you can do to avoid them yourself. One thing to note up front is these mistakes are in no particular order, so you are going to watch this video all the way to the end to make sure that you're not making them yourself. Mistake number one is they spend too much time in tasks they shouldn't. When you're first building a company, you generally have to be involved in everything. If anything, you need to in order to build momentum and get it to grow. As you scale though, your role and responsibilities needs to become far more honed in. This is where so many first-time CEOs struggle though, because their default mode of operating is just to say yes to everything and to dive in without stopping to think whether or not they should. And this is a huge issue because at the end of the day, everything that you do has a cost. Every hour you spend in one thing is an hour that could have been spent in something else. And that's why if you want to be a highly effective CEO, what you don't do becomes just as important as what you do. And this is why it's so important to start to recognize what you're actually committing to and taking on. The way that I always recommend that people do this is you need to figure out what is your zone of genius? What are your key responsibilities? What in the business can only be done by you? As in, where does your time have the greatest impact? Then when you start to say yes to new tasks and responsibilities, you need to look at it through the lens of, does this fall into my zone of genius? Does getting this done have a greater impact on the business? Is this something that only I can do? If the answer to that is no, then who else could do it? Who could you delegate it to or hand it off to? By taking a few minutes to slow down and process this, you can free up hours every single week. Not only that, overloading yourself is also mentally and emotionally exhausting. So if you keep getting stuck in the weeds or spinning your wheels, all that's going to do is take your energy away from the things where you need it most. This is also why I really recommend taking some time each week to stop and audit what you're doing. I'll give you an example. I sat down with a CEO recently and we broke down his calendar and we looked at his schedule and everything that he had going on. And we started going through every single meeting and task, really looking at, okay, is this something that he actually needs to be doing? And for a lot of them, we found that yes, he needed to when he first started the company, but now he'd built a great team. This is not something that he really needed to be involved in. And the better path would be to remove himself and let it go. By going through this, we've managed to free up over 15 hours every single week, which is now time that he can spend driving growth. And this is why it's so important to just sit down and look at what you have on and really think about, is this actually a good use of my time, or could I delegate this? And to take it a step further, I also recommend take some time every single morning. Just take a couple of minutes to look at your day ahead. What meetings do you have on? What tasks do you have scheduled in? And really ask yourself, does this need to be done by you, or could you delegate it? If you could delegate it, who could you give it to? This is going to free up hours every single week and allow you to actually focus on what you need to do. I actually have a free training called the CEO Time Audit Process where I show you how to audit your days and your time to really figure out what you should and shouldn't be doing. And I'll drop the link so that you can watch that for free in the description of this video. Mistake number two is not clearly communicating. I see this all the time in CEOs I speak to where they're these big visionary thinkers with huge ideas and they're used to executing and operating at pace. And while this was an amazing way of doing things when it was just them or they were first starting out, now that they're scaling and have an expanding team, it's one of the biggest things causing mistakes and fires and reactive problems. The reason being is people can't read your mind. Just because it makes sense in your head doesn't mean that it makes sense to everyone else. And this is why if you want to avoid these mistakes, you have to learn to slow down and make sure that everyone is on the same page. After all, it's your job as a leader to bring everyone along with you, not just expect them to understand what's happening. I saw this in a conversation with a client recently where he had tasked his team to go and do a project. He was clear in his mind, he had the vision, he knew exactly what he wanted. They went away and did it and came back with something completely different. And he got really frustrated because he couldn't understand how they missed the mark so much. But it was only when he started to talk to them about it, he realized that what they had understood from him, he could see completely why they had come up with this outcome. And it was all because he hadn't slowed down to communicate, this is what he needed, this is the outcome that he wanted, this is what was actually expected. And this is why I'm such a big advocate. If you have to learn to slow down, you need to figure out what is the outcome, what do you need to communicate, how do you then need to address it to the room and make sure everyone's on the same page before just assuming they are and bouncing on to the next thing. Remember, just because your default mode of doing things is to get things done and to rush through it doesn't mean that everyone else can keep up. And when you start to slow down and you clearly communicate, you're going to make sure they avoid so much mistakes and that things actually get done and move forward. Speaking of slowing down, mistake number 3 is not taking time to process and think. Because when you're running a company, it's easy just to get stuck in the trenches where every single day is putting out fires, solving other people's problems, dealing with never-ending demands. And what this does is keep you stuck in a reactive state where something happens, you react to it, and then try and move forward. Yes, this can get things done, but at the end of the day, there's no way you can make the right decisions or show up at your best when you're in that high stress state. The reason being is there's a really big difference between a reaction and a response. A reaction is driven by emotion, it's impulsive, whereas a response is processed and controlled. And that's why if you want to be more effective in your role, you have to give yourself time to slow down, where you step back and you can actually process problems and allow yourself to think. This is why I always encourage clients to take some time every single week where they get away. Go for a walk, allow yourself just to get some fresh air, to think about what you're doing, the challenges that you have, and allow yourself just to be in the moment and process these problems. Another way to do it is also to allocate time where you step away to really look at the top level of what's going on. I'll give you an example of this. I was working with a client recently who came to me frustrated with the fact that he was just stuck in the weeds, working in, not on the business. And when I started looking at what was happening, the reason why this was going on is he was just pulled into reactive problems every single day. They didn't really have the time to think about what he needed to do to drive the business forward. So what I encouraged him to do was to take half a day where he would change his environment. He went and rented a workspace with a big whiteboard and he turned off his phone. He communicated to the team that he wouldn't be available. He went in and he spent the morning just looking at their next 90 days. He thought about the strategy, the things they wanted to move forward, where he needed to be spending his time. What this allowed him to do was gain a whole level of clarity and control where he could then go back in and know exactly what needed to get done. He found this to be such a powerful morning that he's actually committed to doing it every single 90 days. And this is why I really encourage you to set aside this time where you just step back and look at the bigger picture. Whether you do that every 30, 60, 90 days is completely up to you. And even schedule time every single week just for you to slow down and think about what's happening. I know it's uncomfortable, especially when something in the moment always feels like it needs your attention. But when you create this time to think, that's where you're going to get your best ideas, and it's how you're going to innovate and grow. Mistake number 4 is not defending their time. I speak to so many first-time CEOs who want to be the leader that people can turn to. They want to create a culture where people feel comfortable coming to them with their problems. And while this is really admirable, it brings with it so many issues, because if you're constantly dropping what you need to do to help other people, what it means is you're not actually going to move forward your key tasks and priorities. And I have so many of these conversations where people are like, yeah, I know I shouldn't say yes and I shouldn't be pulled into it, but they feel selfish or guilty, or they don't want to build this ego where they think that their time is more valuable. And I always have to challenge their way of thinking and say, yes, But it is. At the end of the day, it's your responsibility to grow and move forward this business, which you're never going to be able to do if you're not actually prioritizing the tasks that you need to get done. And that's why it's not selfish to say no. If anything, it's selfish to say yes, because everyone else who's counting on you is missing out on all the growth and sustainability and certainty that you could create. And this is why if you want to be a more effective CEO, you have to get comfortable with saying no, with doing things on your own agenda. That means if someone messages you or comes in your office and says, have you got a few minutes to help me with this? Say yes, but I need you to come back at 3 o'clock today. Or whenever you look and you have availability, and start helping people on your schedule, not theirs. The other thing that you need to think about is if you always dive in and solve other people's problems, it also creates a culture where people don't think for themselves. It's easier for them just to hand it off for you rather than doing it on their own. And long term, this is going to massively impact not just the culture, but the growth and the way that things operate. And this is why you'd be far better off pushing back, saying to people, look, I understand there's a problem. I want you to go away, come back to me with solutions, and we'll discuss it then. When you start to empower people to step up, you'd be amazed at how much they can start actually operating on their own. And this is why it's so important to defend your time. Don't just get pulled in. Be comfortable saying no and actually prioritize the things you need to get done. Mistake number 5 is not facing tough conversations. You'd be amazed at how many first-time CEOs I speak to who will put off difficult conversations for weeks, if not months at a time. It's almost like an ostrich putting their head in the sand, where they feel like if they just avoid the problem, it'll go away. The thing is though, it doesn't. And the more that you put these things off, you allow mistakes and underperformance to continue, problems to manifest, frustrations to build in the team, and it's just not a good environment to work in. And not only that, when you're always avoiding these things you know you need to do, it puts you into this high stress state where you lose so much focus and attention worrying about the thing that you don't want to get done. And this is why if you want to be an effective CEO, you have to face these things head on. I found that the easiest way to do this is to reframe what these conversations actually are. Because the reason you're worried about doing it is because you're building up in your mind, worrying about how that other person's going to react. You're worried that they're going to get angry, they're going to get upset, they're going to get mad or frustrated, whatever it is. That's what you're trying to avoid. The thing is though, you don't know that's going to happen. You're making an assumption and then talking yourself out of it. And this is why you really need to reframe what's actually happening. Because a lot of the time you're building it up in your head as a far bigger issue than it actually is. This is why I always say to clients to reframe it from a difficult conversation to a clarity conversation. It's a discussion to figure out what's happening, get on the same page, and move forward. That makes it far easier to face. Also, like I said, a big part of the reason why you may be struggling with these is because you're avoiding them and building them up in your head. And this is why the longer you delay, the worse it's going to become. That's why I always encourage clients that when there's a tough conversation you need to have, either do it straight away or schedule it and commit to doing it as soon as possible. That doesn't mean being reactive and going in emotional. You do need to figure out in advance what you need to communicate. What's the point you want to get across? What's the outcome that you want? Take a few minutes to process that and then get it done. You'll find by pulling off the band-aid, it's not actually that bad. And also one thing that you'll see as well, the more that you do this, the more confident you'll become, and you'll see that a lot of these conversations aren't actually that bad. I was talking to a client about this recently who, when him and I met, one of his biggest problems was putting off these tough conversations. And we were talking about how much he'd grown. And he was telling me now they no longer faze him. They're just things he needs to get done. He knows it's part of the role. And that was because he committed to facing them head on and just getting out of his own way. So like I said, when there's a tough conversation to have, figure out what you need to say, what is the outcome that you want, and commit to facing it as soon as possible. You'll find so much more calm and composure when you actually get this done. Mistake number 6 is wanting certainty before making decisions. When you're running a company with all of this pressure and demands on you, it's really easy to fall into a headspace where you want to get everything right. You don't want to make mistakes. You want to get everything perfect. But what this does as a first-time CEO is it keeps you stuck in your own head, where you then start to overthink, you second guess yourself, and you avoid things. And all this does is cause business to stall. And this is why you have to recognize that life in business is full of uncertainties. Sometimes you have to take action and make decisions on the information that you have and then figure it out along the way. That doesn't mean being reckless, but it does mean taking calculated risks and taking imperfect action, because that's how you build momentum and grow. Also recognizing that you are going to make mistakes. You're not always going to get everything right, and that's okay. When that happens and you're presented with new insights and information, you can pivot, you can change your mind. So you're far better off making a decision and moving forward than you are stalling and delaying, because all that's going to do is kill your momentum. Mistake number 7 is following standard productivity advice. I had a first-time CEO come to me frustrated with the fact that he wasn't getting any of his high-value work done. And when we started breaking down how he was spending his days, he'd approach them with the standard productivity advice. He'd create his to-do list, he'd figure out his key priorities, he'd plan his day, and then he would dive in. And on paper, all of this sounds great, because why wouldn't you plan for your key priorities? But the issue with it is this advice works really well for people in cubicle jobs with linear to-do lists. But when you're running a company, it's far too short-sighted, because most of the time, these key priorities are going to be about what's important on that day or in that moment, without factoring in your top priorities and growth. Going back to that client as an example, like at that period, they were going through a big fundraise and most of his time needed to be spent on building relationships with investors and writing pitches and doing presentations. But what he found was happening is he was spending so much time on this to-do list that he would maybe get around to this by 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon, where he'd have an hour to spend on it. And this is a huge problem, because not only is that if they didn't get this fundraise right, there wouldn't be a business to come back to. Also, by the time he got to it, he was mentally drained, so he didn't have the energy to execute on this properly. This is why we needed to restructure his days, building them around his high value work. What this looked like for him is we figured out, okay, he needed about 3 hours a day to be focusing on these tasks. So rather than hoping he'd get to it eventually, what we did is we built his schedule out where 9 until 12 every day was just blocked off for these high value work. It was communicated to the team that he was unavailable. He wouldn't be checking Slack or messages or anything else. That unless the building was on fire, they weren't to contact him. He would then get up, he wouldn't check his emails or anything else. He'd get this work done. At 12, he would take a break, have some lunch. Then he would start his day the way he used to. He'd go into the to-do list, he'd check his messages, and move forward everything else they needed to do. This is why it's so important that you need to figure out what is your high value work, what are your zone of genius tasks, how much time do you need for them each week, really relaying it to your 90-day goals, your KPIs, your year targets, whatever that may look like for you, and then you need to structure and schedule this time. Also thinking about how much energy and focus do you need to be doing these tasks, and which time of the day are you best going to be at to execute them properly. Schedule this first and then go into everything else, and you'll actually be able to get done what you need to. Mistake number 8 is not reflecting on what happened. The mentality of so many first-time CEOs is just go, 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 try and get things done and get through the day. And while this can keep them moving forward, it means they're overlooking so many opportunities for growth. The reason being is when you slow down and you reflect on what happened, that's when you can figure out what you did, how to improve, mistakes you're making, and things to do better in the future. The way I always frame this for clients is it's a lot like an elite athlete going back and watching old game footage. By looking at what they did, this is how they see how to improve and how to get an edge for the future. And if you want to be a highly effective CEO, we have to treat it in exactly the same way. To give you an example of this is why when I'm working with my private clients, I track the entire journey, everything that's going on, from how they structure their days to where they're spending their time, how they deal with tough conversations, what throws them off their game. And then every single week we take time to really break down and talk about what happened. How did they navigate that challenge? What could they have done differently? What would have allowed them to feel more prepared? And then more importantly, what do they need to do the next time? What this does is really build their confidence and intuition. It's not about dwelling on the past or the things they did wrong. It's all about preparing them to know, okay, next time I'm in this situation, this is how I'm going to handle it. This is how you really start up leveling your own mindset and skill set. None of which you're going to do if you're just overlooking this and pushing through, because you're just going to make the same mistakes and you're never going to become that next level version of you. This is why if you really want to become more effective in your role, take a few minutes at the end of every single day to reflect on what happened. Take some time to journal, to think about, to process. What did you do? What mistakes did you make? What did you get right? What do you need to learn from it? And this is how you're really going to improve for the future. Mistake number 9 is viewing asking for help as a weakness. So many of the first-time CEOs I speak to have this belief that they need to know everything, that they're the ones who have to have all of the answers. And all this does is keep them siloed where they're afraid to ask for help from others. At the end of the day, though, if you want to be a great leader, it's not your job to know everything. It's your job to surround yourself with the right people, get the best minds on it, figure out all the information you need, and then make decisions and take action from there. None of which you can do when you're just trying to convince yourself that you need to know all the answers, because then you're going to be spending your days in tasks you shouldn't, or just winging it and just making uninformed decisions. That's why you'd be far better off asking the experts and the team that you've surrounded yourself with, what are their thoughts, what are their opinions, where are you unsure? Clarify it and then move forward, rather than getting stuck in your own head feeling like you need to know or do everything yourself. Mistake number 10 is telling yourself that once something happens, life is going to be easier. I hear it all the time with CEOs saying to me that once I get through this project, my workload will be lighter. Once we secure this raise, I'll be less busy and less stressed out. The thing is, though, there's always going to be something going on. Because just think, how many times have you said to yourself that once you hit that next goal, that next milestone, that next threshold, that's when you'll take some time off, you'll spend more time with your family, you'll prioritize yourself. But isn't that what you said the time before and the time before that? At the end of the day, there's never going to be a right time to really look after yourself or get these other areas of your life in sync. And that's why if you don't make it a priority, things are going to continue falling apart. I come across so many CEOs who in building their company, they've sacrificed everything. And now that they've got the success, they start to resent it because they look at everything that they lost along the way. And this is why I'm such a big believer that you have to learn to balance everything else going on in your life. And the way that you do that is really by developing the right routines, looking at the habits you need to create, looking at the things that drain your energy, and then more importantly, setting the right boundaries, not just with other people, but with yourself. The thing you need to recognize is that building a business is a marathon, not a sprint. And if you're always just pulled into the day-to-day, you're just going to burn yourself out. And this is going to be one of the biggest risks to your longevity. I'll never forget, there was an application call I had with a CEO who, when I looked at his LinkedIn, everything looked amazing. Like they were scaling, they just won all of these awards. It looked like everything was great. And we got on the call and he just started breaking down. He was like, it's taken everything out of me to get to this point. Like I'm exhausted. I'm having to just live on caffeine and energy drinks to get through these meetings. Like everyone always wants something from me. And he's like, we doubled in size last year. We're about to do the same again. And I don't know if I have any fight left in me. Yet to the outside world, he was putting on this facade and this act that he had it all together because he didn't want everyone else to see that his internal state didn't match his external success. And this is why for him, such a big part of it was really breaking down what was he doing, what was he committing to, how was he spending his days, and really looking at where he was getting in his own way. Because if you don't learn to protect your energy and your bandwidth and your focus, or really prioritize time for the things that matter, your business is just going to feel like a mental and emotional drain where you're going to get to the point where you're going to start to question, is it actually worth it? And you can't create an impact or change the world or build something that's actually sustainable if it takes everything out of you along the way. And this is why it's so important to slow down and recognize what you're doing every single day. Because if you don't get yourself in check, you're never going to be able to show up as the leader that your business needs. After all, you can't show up for others if you're exhausted, you have no energy, and you're not the best version of yourself. I know it's tough, but it's just so important to recognize there's always going to be a reason not to do something. There's always going to be something that in the moment feels more important. And this is why you have to figure out what's truly important. Raise your standards and just allow yourself to prioritize what matters most. This is how you'll be in it for the long haul. Mistake number 11 is thinking like a founder or manager and not a CEO. One of my favorite quotes is your business's growth will never outgrow your inner growth. And this is why it's so important to recognize that what got you to where you are today isn't going to get you to where you want to be tomorrow. I said this at the start of the video that being a founder or manager is completely different to being a CEO. And this is why your current way of doing things, your mindset, your way of operating and how you're spending your day may be the very reason you're stuck and not getting to the next level of success. As an example of this, when I work with clients in my Evolve program, the first thing we do is focus on upgrading their identity. We really figure out, okay, who is the next level version of them? Who's that CEO who's showing up confidently, who's making timely decisions, who's leading and really inspiring their team? We look at who they need to become, and that's when we can reverse engineer the journey. We can look at, okay, these are the habits, the behaviors, the routines, the mindset, and way of doing things that they need to embody and take on to really evolve into that next level version of themselves. Like I said, what got you to where you are today isn't going to get you to where you want to be tomorrow. And every new level of success is going to require a new level of you. This is why the most effective CEOs are always looking at up-leveling themselves, developing their mindset, their skills, their way of doing things, because they know to keep the business growing, they need to constantly evolve themselves. Now, this is a little bit out of the realm of what we're going to cover in this video, but if you do want to dive into this further, I've got a video where I break down the battle-tested 5-step process that I use with all of my first-time CEO clients to really evolve them into the CEO that their business needs to get to the next level of success. So if you want to take control and become more effective in your role so that you can maximize your time and lead with confidence and ultimately grow a business without losing your sanity, you can check this out using the link in the description of this video. So there you have it, 11 of the biggest mistakes first-time CEOs make that stop them from being as effective as they could or need to be. To finish this video, I actually want to share with you a bonus mistake. And the reason why I left this one separately is in many ways it's very much related to everything else I've spoken to you about. And that's why mistake number 12 is being too hard on themselves. Look, there's no denying that being your own harshest critic is a great motivator, especially when it pushes you to grow and get better. But if your default mindset whenever something goes wrong or even right is to focus on what you could have done better and to beat yourself up over it, you're never going to feel like you're enough. I speak to so many CEOs who are their own worst enemy because they're always focusing on the things that they did wrong. And all this does is get them to question their self-worth and knock their confidence because they never give themselves credit for the things they get right and the growth they actually create. And this is why it's so important to start to recognize the progress that you're making, to know when you did your best and learn to cut yourself some slack. That doesn't mean be lazy and accept mediocre results, but it's really just being at peace that you gave it your all. Because the reality is, in business, there's going to be times where you're going to do everything right and you're still going to come up short. And not only that, regardless of what you achieve, there's always going to be room to improve or things you could have done better. And this is why I'm such a big believer that you have to shift your focus from the past to the future. Yes, learn from these things and improve, but don't allow yourself to live in your own head, dwelling on everything that you wish you did differently. At the end of the day, you're under enough pressure as it is. You've got all of these expectations and people wanting things from you. You're just making it worse by putting unrealistic expectations on yourself. And when you can learn just to be kinder to yourself and recognize that at times you're doing the best that you can, the journey is going to become so much easier. So there you have it, some of the biggest mistakes I see first-time CEOs making. Let me know down in the comments below, which of these resonate with you most? Which are the ones that you really need to focus on going forward? Also, if you're new here, make sure you hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss future videos. And if you want to dive into any of this further, you can also find links in the content to some free trainings, the overview of the process I use with my private clients, and also links to check out my books, The Effective CEO and CEO in Control. I've been Byron Morrison. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.